Good evening. I'm Dorothy Gale, the chair of the program committee for the Northumberland Learning Connection. On behalf of the Learning Connection, I'm happy to welcome everyone here for our next to last event in our Alberta series. I respectfully acknowledge that Northumberland County, where we are based, is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, the Iroquois, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples. This territory has been inhabited and cared for from the beginning by Indigenous people and is covered by the Williams Treaty. Most of you have been here before, so you know the basics. We have a mask mandate, and we ask that you wear your masks unless you're seated and drinking your coffee and tea, which is available at the back. BJ's books, the ones that are available commercially, are available at the back from Alex at Furby Books, if you wave there. And BJ will be happy to sign those after. They will also be available tomorrow at the Capitol. At the far end of that table is some information, and BJ has 2 other books as well as a CD, which aren't easy to access, but if you take the information, you can get them from his website or talk to him after the event, once you see how good he is. Okay, you can't have a series on Alberta without cowboys and horses, but just not any cowboy. BJ Smith is a horse trainer, riding coach, and wilderness guide. He has taught equine wilderness topics at the university and college level, so he's no ordinary cowboy. In addition, he does clinics for the Alberta Trail Riders Association and private equestrian clubs. He served as president of the Lethbridge Therapeutic Riding Association. All this after a full career with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, where he conducted criminal investigations in Alberta, the Yukon, and Northwest Territories, followed by 15 years as an investigator in Alberta. I guess he didn't finish with Alberta on time while he was with the RCMP and had to go back and finish the job. Finally, to those of us joining us by Zoom after this live event, thanks for your support and listening to a speaker with a rich experience in Western culture and a passion for horses. And no, he wasn't part of the RCM musical ride, but he has got a good story about that, and he might share it with us. So without further ado, over to BJ to give you a talk on where Mustangs are horses.
Oh my goodness. There are a bunch of things that I want to say before I get saying anything. First of all, Dorothy and John are my hosts while I'm here, and if you ever have to stay in a place near Colburn, I recommend Dorothy and John's. Thank you very much. They've been just wonderful to me. Thank you for the introduction. Actually, a fair amount of it was fairly accurate, surprisingly. I want to preface what I have to say first of all, and I hope I'm going to be able to swirl around for a while and end up at the end of it making sense about what I'm going to start with. And what I want to start with is by congratulating the Northumberland Learning Center. It's a wonderful, wonderful idea, and I wish that this was all over the world, for that matter. It wouldn't be bad if it was somewhere in Russia right now, but I think that our world has become so terribly polarized because of the lack of good information from the horse's mouth, if you don't mind me saying that, and having speakers come and speak to you about topics that you have an interest in is a wonderful thing, and I just want to congratulate you for this initiative that you people have. Now, what I'm going to try to accomplish is multitasking, I think it's called. I'm going to try to talk and hold a microphone. I don't like those little guys that plug in under your mustache. They seem to get lost in there somewhere, and it causes me a problem. And I'm also going to try to be computer wise, and before I get started, I want to make sure remember, Dorothy, we talked about where those buttons are? Where is the up and down on this one? Howdy, folks, that's me. Okay, so I'll start by explaining who I am. So Dorothy told you probably more than you really needed to know, but I'll carry on with that. The thing I really want to talk to you about is cowboy poetry. People when they hear, when they say, "What do you do?" and I say, "Well, I do this cowboy poetry." That's how I say it. It's cowboy poetry. When I was a kid in school, poetry was not something I had anything to do with, and Longfellow and that was a long ways away from my interests. But when I started working with livestock as an older teenager and then into my early years, and then when I got really involved with horses, and although I had a career in the mounted police, I was always around horses. And I can't diverge here too much because I got a lot of material I got to get through. But anyway, I found out that cowboy poetry is something that's been around. They had a lot of it in Scotland in the 1600s. Anybody that works with livestock knows, that's successful, knows the better you are at keeping them quiet and contented, the better they are. Both their health is better and their attitude is better and everything is better. In North America, if you could imagine, it's 1865 and the Civil War is over and Texas is producing huge herds of cattle that have to go somewhere because during the Civil War they became mavericks really. They just were out there. A lot of those cattle drives started, and they'd come up through Kansas, and all the way up through Montana and into Alberta. There's movies about that sort of thing. One in particular called Lonesome Dove does a good job of giving you a history of these big cattle drives. If you were driving a herd of cattle, 10,000 was not unusual at all. There's no fences, and there's no trailers, and there's no nothing. It's just space. And you get towards the end of in the later part of the afternoon and you think, well, any time now would be a good time to pack it in for the day. What they'd do is they'd start moving the cattle into a big circle. They'd just start easing them one way or the other. So the cattle would start to move into a circle and circle and circle. And finally the cows would start to get tired of this centrifugal motion they're on, and they would start bedding down. Cattle don't normally bed down 10,000 in one place. There'll be 50 here and 200 over there and 25 over there and all like that. So there's a whole bunch of little camps of cattle laying down, enjoying the evening and chewing their cud. The cowboys would all have the night off and watch Netflix or whatever. No, the cowboys would all have the night off, except for, depending on the size of the herd, there'd be 2 or 3 or 4 night riders. And their job was to ride the perimeter of all those cattle to keep them in one place and to keep predators from bothering them. And they found out real early. I'm sure they weren't even hardly out of Texas when they found out that if you did that, especially on a cloudy night or a night where there is no moon and it's quite dark, and you didn't make noise while you were riding that perimeter, you could come around some bushes or come over a little knoll and scare some cattle, which would jump up and start to run in the darkness, and they'd run by some other ones and some other ones and some other ones, and you've got yourself a stampede because you weren't making noise. Now, you didn't want to make yahoo-y rodeo-type noises, but you did want to not scare cattle as you came upon them, so these cowboys got pretty good at telling their horses stories. This is all true. And they would tell their horses sometimes really good stories. It's so good that they'd kind of like to remember to tell their buddies back at the camp or in the town when they get back home. And the best way to remember a story is to put it into rhyme. And that's what cowboy poetry is all about. There's lots of festivals out west and a lot in the States where it's all cowboy poetry. And there's a lot in Australia. I've run into lots of fellows in Australia. So now when you hear this guy does cowboy poetry, it's actually a real thing. Okay. said all of that to tell you very little, but I wanted to explain it. I'm not losing my marbles. It's okay. Is this? This is it. So the first thing I want to talk to you about a little bit is I do a lot of riding. I still do. I'm still starting colts, and I don't see an end in it yet. And I'm not a kid anymore, but the longer I am with my horse friends, the happier I am. It's never worn thin on me yet. I've gotten to make a lot of observations riding in the backcountry, especially where it's pristine and unspoiled, and there really is, it's pretty remote. And also in my experiences in the Arctic, when I was in the northern part of the Yukon and the territories and up into the islands, about indigenous peoples and how much wisdom they had. They always had it, but how much wisdom they had, and they could have imparted on us if we only would have been wise enough to realize that they maybe weren't like us, but they didn't mean that they're not intelligent. And so I got to listening to a lot of things that Native people would do and tell me and so forth, and it benefits me a lot as I ride now. And in modern times, I ride through the mountains. There's all kinds of things that I'm doing all the time that I thank my indigenous friends for. And I wanted to just quickly run through a couple of things. Hope this is working out okay. So I'm saying there that cowboys and Indians live their life close to nature. We don't. The thing is that we're not trying to tame it or adjust it or fix it or whatever. We live with nature, and for everything in nature, especially when you get into wilderness, you see that everything has a purpose. There's a reason why it's there. It's quite fascinating, but everything has a purpose. Okay. So I'm going to run through a couple of few little examples. We have lots of fireweed. I bet you do too. It follows fires. Maybe I'm wrong about Ontario, but I don't know. But we have lots of fireweed that follows the fires. That's one of the first things that comes up. It's a plant it's got lots of benefit. And I just quickly, I'm going to quickly go through this and you can read what I've got there. But one of the things that I've discovered is mosquito bites, roses and fireweed. If you get a mosquito bite and you just rake off a few of those flowers, or if it's not in flower, just the leaves, and rub it on your mosquito bite, it takes it right away. It does. Poplar. Have you ever seen an old picture of natives in war paint? And they're going to a ceremony or they're going somewhere, but they're in war paint. Generally, you'll see that the base coat, for ladies that wear makeup, you have a base coat. The base coat will be white. And the reason that is because they use, if you're riding along in poplars or aspens we have, and you run your hand up and down the bark, your hand will be all white. If you got that kind of poplar here, you'll see. And if you rub it on yourself, it's wonderful sunscreen. Works really good as a sunscreen. But they would always use that as the base of their war paint because then they could wipe it off at night when the war is over. So I think I'm wrong button. There, okay. The wild rose, I talked to you about the wild rose. They're very tasty. Rose petals, have you ever just put them in a salad? It's unbelievable. You just don't think about eating rose petals, but taste them. They're really good. They're good in a tea. But anyway, and I already said about the bacteria. We have lots of wild roses and wild raspberries in the mountains in season, and they're very, very nutritional. Lots of stuff in there. Quickly go through that. Two more that are a little bit different. So this lichen that we have a lot in our forest, I'm not sure about you, it hangs in trees, and it looks dirty and yucky. But it's actually the thing you want to put in an open wound. It's exactly what you want to put in an open wound, and then put your dressing on top of it. Very But the main thing that I came across is, and I saw this, I've seen this myself, is that's what the Native people didn't know about diaper rash because their diapers were lined with this. It's abundant, but because it's very anesthetic, and they would use this for their diapers. Now, the last thing, everything has a purpose, and in the mountains, there's a number of plants that are quite deadly. And this is one of them. This is quite a deadly plant. It usually grows in meadows where there's lots of grass that's very palatable for the ungulates and the horses and so forth. But this one will kill them. And this fascinates me. But I can take horses in to these meadows where this death camas is growing, and they've never seen it before, and yet Mother Nature somehow has taught them you don't eat those. You can't force them to eat it. And so why has it got a purpose? Because it protects the ground around it from overgrazing, and it makes the grazers more particular about what they're eating instead of concentrating. If you have horses in your pasture, on your acreage, you know how they'll trim that right down to the roots and then paw for the roots. But if you had this there, that wouldn't happen. So, okay, hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so now I'm going to go here. So now this is where I get kind of goofy. I'm going to try not to stand in front of the screen. The older I get, and the more nature that gets in between my ears, the more out there in left field thoughts I get. And I'll be talking to you about communicating with horses. And I feel that there is communication going on in this room, and it's got nothing to do with my voice. It's got to do with energy. It's vibration, it's energy. And I know for sure that in working with horses, when you get to know what you're doing, you can feel the talking you're doing and they're doing. You don't say it. It isn't in your voice. It's feel. That's why I say this, feel the talk. So try this one on for size. I think that flowers talk to bees as upward turn their shining faces. More than idle fantasies, their energy invades these places, and all around the sights and sounds of conversation there abounds. I've seen the snowbirds in a flock that by the hundreds fly together. If it's true they do not talk, how is it they don't break their tether, binding them as if as one in dips and dives of airborne fun? And what about the elk at dawn that in the morning mist are sipping? Silently they are gone with water from their muzzles dripping. Not a noise is ever heard, they sound alarm without a word. I've watched the horses as they play in games that children know as tag, and as they flee they seldom stray or let the young and feeble lag, for with their bodies and their gait they constantly communicate. I've wandered in the forest ringing for a summer storm unleashes. Cheerfully the birds are singing, then in union their song ceases. Silently they seem to say shelter is where we should stay. Well, it makes me wonder as I reach to understand the depth of talk, if words is only part of speech, like run is first of all just walk, then if we listen to the air, is information waiting there? It seems that in this universe, as if it were some sort of scheme, the human beings have a curse of thinking they must reign supreme, and in so doing abdicate the wisdom that makes creatures great. But I believe that if we try, since we all come from common stuff, we'll understand the reasons why listening is for us so tough. When we put arrogance aside, why, Mother Nature will abide. I hope that makes sense to you. Okay, thank you. Sometimes I ride in fire, in forest fire. It's happening, it's alarming a little bit, and it's happening a little bit more often now than what we'd like, and I think that I'm one that that believes that global warming that's occurring in the world is having a big impact on the frequency of fire and the intensity of fire. But I wanted to make a couple of comments about in the forest anyway, where there isn't shopping centers and homes located. Fire does a lot of good. It cleans up the forest. You can ride in an old forest and you can tell whether there was a fire in this forest by how clean the floor of the forest is and what the trees are in the forest. Generally, fire is what generates a whole new generation of plants and wildlife, and the wildlife benefit from that. Moose are particularly grateful for a fire that happened 3 years ago because they're a browser. They eat tips of trees, and it flourishes. All these bushes that they count on flourishes after a fire. So it isn't always bad, but boy, it's hard picking your way through all that deadfall. Okay, so now I thought I'd throw this in. Where I get to ride is along the Continental Divide, and I will straddle it go both ways. But it often occurs to me that I'm sitting or I'm riding along where gravity is taking whatever water is right here on this little creek here. It's taking it a long, long ways away, all the way past you folks, or all the way down to the Pacific Ocean, and it's kind of humbling. I was asked to speak at an event very much like this, and I was actually just the warm-up act or the introduction for a speaker that had won a Nobel Prize for a module that she had created on conserving water, and it was used in Africa primarily and in India, and she'd won this prize, this Nobel Prize, and they said, would I make some comments about water? So this is what I came up with. As I cup my hands together, so as not to leave a steam, and sip some godly nectar from an alpine meadow stream, well, I know what they were meaning, those sons of pioneers, when they sang of cool, clear water way back so many years. Well, first the little trickle matures into a creek, with gravity to steer it towards adventures it will seek. Babbling forward peaceful as night gives way to dawn, a herd of elk are simping, and then swiftly they are gone. And then the creek gets swollen as it comes to rest against the work of beavers interrupting there its quest. See, a family of these rodents, the largest of their breed, have built themselves a beaver dam stocked with winter feed. And to share the pristine swimming pool, a solitary moose, head submerged in water, antlers draped in marshy sluice, while the stream continues onward, flowing down the valley floor, growing ever larger as it's joined by many more, until majestic mountains give way to wide expanse, past falls and raging rapid staging, thrilling circumstance where kayaks test their resolve, ride the roar that it's become. Human laughter echo nature's challenge there for some. Well, across the plains, the fledgling river slowly starts to steer before a modest helping is diverted by a weir that feeds a farming district at the mercy of the rain, now blessed with irrigation, prompting agriculture gain. Well, it isn't too much further that a city looms ahead, with thirst that's never ending for the river's watershed that quenches so benevolent the urban appetite and is reimbursed with sewage, discreetly kept from sight. But miles of rolling tumble nearly clean the water clear before more skyline scrapers ahead are looming near. Now, not always does consumption seem justified or wise. Human entertainment ignores conservation cries. Well, beyond the Great Lakes, it finds rest. The pull of earth no longer. The river can now rest and then rise into the heavens like a misty kind of dream, and then fall back to a trickle in an alpine meadow stream. There's the circle of water. Thank you. Okay, I think we're gaining on it here. I think I'm starting to get. So now I want to talk about my take on horses. And the reason that I think that this is relevant to this audience. I'm not going to try to turn you all into horse trainers and we're all going to rush out to the parking lot after and grab a horse and practice this. I don't care if you don't even like horses. I encourage you to, but the point I want to make is that there are two things that you need to have to be a successful horse trainer, and they're the same two things that I think you people are trying to accomplish through your pursuit of education. You need to have trust and you need to have respect. And working with horses teach you to have trust and respect. Because if you don't have one or both, they're 1,200 pounds. If you lose your temper with a horse, you're about as smart as him, maybe not quite as smart, and he's 1,200 pounds. And somebody's going to pay and it won't be him. So it's taught me, and it's been wonderful for my personality. I had a challenge like most other people that I had to learn when to hold my temper and so forth. But working with horses, I think, more than anything else, has taught me how important it is to gain trust and respect with everybody, but especially horses. So that's where I'm going with this. This is the Nahanni River above Virginia Falls. This isn't a safe place to be. This is not for the faint of heart, this place. It's very cold water. How in the world it's moving? The only reason it's not below freezing is that it's moving in the summertime, and it's fast. And it's quite a stretch to get across there. I don't know if I haven't counted the horses. You can stand there and count. There's a number of horses that are packed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horses are packed. We're on our way to a base camp, and we're crossing this one, and then we cross the Broken Skull. But we were taking all the horses that we were going to be using for the summer on that one jingle. And so we only have 4 horses packed. None of them are in control. And then there's a whole bunch of horses running loose. None of them are being controlled by anybody. And here we are riding along, and I think there's 3 of us in this picture. I think there was 4 on this trip. And we're handling, I think we had 30 some odd head of horses on that trip. It took us 4 days to get to this river, and then it was another 5 days after we crossed this river to get to where our base camp is. So you can't do that if your horses are scared of you or hate you or wished you were dead. You can't do that. You have to get along with the horses, and the only way you'll ever be able to pull off something like that is if they trust you and they respect you. By respect, well, we'll get into that. And then there's this little thing about being smarter than a horse. My gosh, that's a tall order for a lot of us, but you do need to be slightly smarter than a horse. I won't say any more about that. But I also often wonder when I look at the rough stock events at the rodeo, who's having fun here? I don't think it's the guy on top. Those horses just love to buck you off, and they have so much fun. Winston Churchill and Will Rogers are credited with this saying, and I bet you you see it all over. When I marched around trying to learn how to be a baby Mountie in Regina many, many years ago, in the riding stables, there was a great big sign up above the door that was this saying, but it's so true even up until today. It's not, it really is about your personality. It's good for your person, your character. The outside of a horse is good for your character. Dorothy pointed out that she's trying to be nice to me earlier today. We were looking at these pictures. This is in Kananaskis country. And she said, BJ, you slimmed down. I'd like to compliment you. You slimmed down. But actually, I'm responsible for this. And the picture was a narrow, squatty little picture. And so I thought, I found out how you can just do that. And I just did that. Now, if you believe that. But anyway, there's a lot of things besides riding along on their back. And I got involved in a couple of these things, particularly therapeutic riding. But down in the States, and I don't know that it occurs in Canada, but in Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, New Mexico, there's states down there that use horses, and actually they're BM. What is the land? BLM. They're wild horses that they gather down there, the Bureau of Land Management, and they take them to these prisons, and they invite prisoners to try to break a wild horse. And I'm sure several prisoners don't make out too well, but some of them do, and it's touted as a real good bit of therapy, because they're dealing with anger management, and they're dealing with a 1,200-pound partner. And they are used in business settings for anger management. But therapeutic riding, I did get involved in for many years in that. It's an amazing experience to see what the back of a gentle horse will do for a person that's disabled. And we usually dealt with children that had all kinds of disabilities, but oftentimes it was adults too. And it was a lot of mental situations. It wasn't all just physical. And we'd bring them in, and I'd think, holy mackerel, this isn't going to work out. This person is barely in control of their faculties and so forth. And we'd get them up on that horse, and now they're sitting up looking down at you. Changes their whole attitude. And by the time you get halfway around the arena, they're just having a good time. I just could not believe the effect that had on people. So that's all I got to say about that. And you know what? What do I got here? This will give me a chance to. The only thing I want to comment about here is that oftentimes this is in between ranges. This is the Blackstone Valley, and it's northwest of Calgary in the Rockies, and that's the first range out there. And on this side, behind us, where all you folks are sitting, is a next range. And beyond that is the Continental Divide. So there's 3 ranges. And it's quite common to run into big, large prairies that might run 20 miles or so in between ranges. And it's a favorite place for elk in the winter because the snow doesn't accumulate here like it does up on the slopes. And it was also a favorite hunting area that the natives would go. Well, now that's cattle grazing country, and that changes the dynamics of everything. And I'm big on cattle and cowboys and ranching and everything, but I do sometimes think, I don't know if this is good. But anyway, that's what I want to say there. Okay, so most of what I learned a lot from cowboys, and I've had lots of mentors and old fellows, teamsters and all kinds of old fellows. But without question, the one that I learned the most from is this guy here. And I had him all my life, and he's passed now. He made it to well into his 30s. And I have a poem about him, but I'm not going to say it because that will save me some time. But oh gosh, I get all choked up every time I look at him. He was such an incredibly good horse and taught me all kinds of things. So, in order to understand horses, you need to understand 2 things right away. And one is that horses are prey animals. They're not dogs and cats. And if you treat them like your pet dog or cat, you've already got 2.5 strikes against you. You have to understand they're more like a deer than they are a dog. And the other thing that's equally important is that we are predators. Whether you're a vegetarian or not, you are a predator. You look like a predator. The energy coming off your body, as far as a horse is concerned, is predatory. When you walk up to a horse, I see this all the time, and you go, good boy, and you put your hand, that's what a cougar or a grizzly bear would do as far as a horse is concerned. From here on in, if you ever want to get along with a horse, keep your hands in your pockets or keep them down by your side till you get past their head. Do not put your hand up until you're right at the withers or at the shoulder. And then you can buddy up. If you see another horse walk up if you see 2 horses in a pasture, they don't go nose to nose until they get to the shoulder. Then they will come back. Whereas dogs, that's the way they are. And that's the way we think because we're predators. And so you already have got yourself 2 3/4 strikes out before you've even started. So horses are prey, predators, or people are predators. Does that make sense? The other thing about this is focus and awareness. This is kind of cute. Oh, okay. So first of all, I'll tell you about this. So because horses have, I'll just talk about horses. Because horses have their eyes rotated around here. I'm not a vegetarian, by the way, because I've always been afraid about my eyes was going to start moving if I'm not careful. But it hasn't happened. But anyway, horses and most predators, or most prey, have their eyes in a position so they can be aware of their surroundings much better. And the compromise is it affects depth perception. So the next thing that happens is you go like this with your hand, and the horse goes like that. Because about here, your hand goes out of sight, and they can't tell if you're an inch or a foot away, and that's what causes them alarm. So for those two reasons, keep your hands down till you get up to their shoulders, okay? Whereas a dog, no problem, because their eyes are right there, and they've got lots of depth perception just like we do. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. I'll just I'll just say that when I get to the end of my part of this program, then I'm open for whatever questions for as long as you want, as long as I don't miss my flight on Saturday. But, okay. Okay, imagine that you're in this forest, and in the middle of the forest is a cute meadow, just a nice grassy meadow with some clovers, and just imagine that scene. Get a visual on that. And in the middle of that meadow is a little cute bunny rabbit just sitting there. Just cutest little thing you ever saw, right in the middle. And on that side of the meadow, there's a deer standing. And on this side of the meadow, there's a fox standing. I want to describe to you what each are seeing. So the fox, let's take him first. That fox is sitting over here, and he is looking at that bunny. And he can tell you which way the bunny's ears are going. And he can tell you whether its nose is wiggling. He can tell you whether its tail is flickering. He can tell you if there's a little breeze and it's fluffing up his hair. He could probably tell you what the bunny's eating. That's how focused he is. That's what focus is. That's what predators do. That's what we do. The deer, he can tell you there's a bunny in the meadow. He can tell you that there's about 50 yards of grass to the trees on the other side of the meadow. He can tell you that actually there's mostly spruce, but there are some pine in that and a little bit of, there's a Saskatoon. How about that? He can tell you whether there's 3 or 4 puffy clouds and whether they're cumulus or what. That's awareness, and that's what horses are like. And you got to understand that in order to be able to communicate with them. They're aware of all kinds of things going on all the time. A dangerous situation that teamsters deal with all the time is horses that are blinkered. When you put blinkers on a horse, you're taking away their depth perception. That's intimidating to them. They learn it, and they learn to work with it. But if you walk up and slap that horse on the rump without making any noise, brace yourself. But if he's got a open bridle, you don't have the same situation. Does that make sense? So the bunny actually got away because the fox was chased off by the deer. I just make that up. Maybe I should take that question because I did.
What was the bunny saying? What's the bunny aware?
Well, let's answer that ourselves. Where's the bunny's eyes? What is he then? So if he's a prey, what's he seeing? He's seeing all around the whole. He sees a lot. He won't see anything specifically acute like the fox will, but he will see everything going on. So he'll see movement. If that fox leaped out and started running across towards him, he would definitely see that, and he would get quite focused on that as he ran away. Absolutely. But the fox, I bet you, my point is that he will be so keyed in on one thing, just like pointer dogs that you hunt quail with. Bingo, they get right on one thing, and can't distract them with anything else. Okay. So now, in order to get a predator's respect, you got the best tool to use is restraint. In order to get a predator's respect, the tool you use is restraint. And with dogs, we have leashes, and when you think of little kids in the playground playing and wrestling, children, they're trying to hold each other down or hold each other from going. That's typical children's play. And then one can't get up, and then they say, "Uncle." Remember, we used to say that one. That's typical predatory type play. When you see pups playing, one is constantly trying to hold the other one down. That's the last thing that prey want to do. So this is where it gets a little bit kind of interesting. And I just talked to your neighbor today about catching his horse, which he's having a hell of a time to catch his horse. In prey animals, restraining them causes them panic, because their notion is, if I can't get away, I'm prey. And they don't want to have to deal with, I can't get away. So the thing to get prey animal to respond to you and respect is that you let them go. You don't hold them back, but you control the direction that they're going. Hence the lunge line, which I use all the time, and round pens, which I use a lot of time. I do not try to hold my horse from moving as I'm training them. I allow them to move, but I control where they're going. And to my good fortune, horses are essentially on welfare most of the time. If they could just quit working, they'd be happy about that. And so I get them tired, and they become altogether, yeah, okay, let's go with your program. But if I were to restrain them and tie them to a post, they're breaking their halters and they're panicking. And here's a little example. I trailer horses. I've taught horses to get in the trailers without just get in the trailer and they just get in. I don't even have to really be there. Just open the door, get in. Because I create a situation where they want to get in that trailer, which is counterintuitive, because a horse wouldn't normally want to go into a confined area with a shaky floor. That's not what horses, that's not their wiring. But I use motion, I use this concept, and what I do is when I bring a horse to the trailer for the first time, unless I had it as a baby, there's another thing I'll do, but I won't tell you about that. I put him into motion. And I kind of put him on a short lunge line at the back of the trailer where the trailer door is all wide open. I put him into motion. And then I start letting him slow down. It's at his pace, but I let him slow down. And as he goes past the door, let's pretend you're the door. As he goes past the door, I encourage him to go. And as he comes around like this, I become passive. I don't encourage him to go. It doesn't take very long. It's amazing how bright they are, that he'll get to figure out that when he comes here, the pressure's off. And pretty soon they'll stop there. And then I let it, now he's on the clock, it's up to him. And if he's inquisitive at all about inside the trailer, I let him look, what's in there. But after he stops, if he wants to go again, we're going, and now I push him. And I push him, and then I slow him down, and then he goes. And it'll take usually 3 or 4 times. Sometimes real difficult horses might take 6 or 7 times, but it's not very long, and that horse will get in. And I never load a horse by pulling him in or leading him in. I never take a horse and lead him in. I want it to be his idea, and I want him to go in on his own, and that's why I train him. So, okay, I don't know if I got off the topic on that, but yeah. So the key is motion when I'm working with horses, and in a predator, stopping motion is no big deal. That's kind of what they choose to do with horses. Motion is the most common way that a predator will die. The most common way a predator will die is starvation. And if you are compassionate about the poor deer that gets attacked by the wolf and is eaten to death, that deer got off a hell of a lot better than the wolf that dies, because he's going to starve. That's how predators, they can't find enough to eat, and they die a much worse death, usually. The most common way that a prey animal will die is not starvation. That's why they don't respond very well to food. They die from attack or violence, trauma. That's how they die. That's why it makes them very anxious if you can find them and stop them from being able to get away. Okay? I don't know if I've got... How are we doing for time? I get the thumbs up.
DJ,
So here's my example. Yes?
in your last slide, you said motion begins from the rear.
Oh, I didn't say in that because I'm trying to go too fast. Thank you for that question because that's kind of important. A horse's motion begins from the rear. They generate their motion from their hind end and they push themselves forward. Those front feet are actually catching them, otherwise they'd fall on their face. That's what the front, they don't pull themselves, they push themselves. They talk from the rear forward. We tend to think, well, look at their face, that's what they're talking. Actually, their face is their punctuation. That's what, after they've said what they're saying, that's the period at the end of what they said, or the exclamation mark or whatever, or the question mark. But motion to a horse, it both physically and mentally begins from the rear. So let's go to the tail. And if the tail is a dish rag just hanging there, that horse is telling you everything is good. I'm fine. I'm not concerned about anything. Everything is fine. It isn't just an item that's hanging back there. It actually is telling you something. If the tail is just swishing like this, it's most likely, damn it, there's a fly. Damn it, that's bothering me. But if it's whipping like this, if it goes like that, it's anger. And you should know that. And you should watch for that. And when I'm dealing with, especially young horses, I'm watching what they're doing with their hind end all the time. If a horse ever turns its hind end like that to me, that's not cute. That's giving me the finger, and I don't mean number one. And so I need to get, that horse I need to get its respect. A horse will never turn its rear end to me. And how I train it not to do that is I start it moving. And I don't let up until that horse is going, oh my God, I'll never do that again, believe me. I don't get mean, I don't beat on it, because don't you forget, I need to get its trust too. I don't need just its respect. It's interesting that with men and women, women have a real advantage in gaining horses' trust because their voices are, well, women, they're just, you love them. And they're nice, and horses do too. They've got soft movements, and just touching them, they're soft. And men are abrasive and deeper voiced and so forth. And so for a man to get a horse's trust is a bigger challenge. But women, you have a hard time getting their respect. And they get after a while, so they'll step on you if you don't get out of their way. And that's just as important as getting trust. Okay, I'm sorry. Did I? Okay. And you can work your way all the way up. The barrel has a lot to do. The position of their feet has a lot to do with what they're saying. And then all the way down to their head. I'm not saying that the head isn't important, but it's kind of the end of the sentence, not the beginning. Okay. So I had an old fellow. When you were younger, do you ever remember dealing with old people that you were patient with them and so forth, but my gosh, you know, when I first was working with horses, there was this old rancher that I befriended, and he was just a heck of a good guy, and he knew more about horses than I'll ever know. He forgot more about horses than I'll ever know, but he taught me one of my early lessons, and it took place in the wintertime on his ranch. And if you will permit me, I'll tell you the poem that I wrote about that experience. It actually happened exactly the way the poem goes, or sort of. Let's hitch up the chestnut mare, he said with a grin one day, because you won't find better conditions for a one-horse open sleigh. See, the night had delivered a blanket of snow to the rancher's yard, and it glistened in the sunshine. It looked like a Christmas card. Well, how could I turn down a teamster how could I turn down a teamster that was wise as he? For I was just learning about harness and the use of a single tree. Well, there was docks and bars in the breeding of the mare I decided to hitch. I broke her when she was a filly. I knew she could be a real witch. She had muscles on top of her muscles. Her withers had classic form, a quarter horse frame that was suited for running down steers in a storm. The track was really her forte. She had quarter horse speed to burn. Her idea of a collected canter was slowing for the clubhouse turn. Now, the sleigh was an open coach model just right for a light Sunday cruise. It was built for its classy appearance and was something you wouldn't abuse. Well, the eyes of my friend were glistening as he told me about how it feels to remember the days of the horses before there was automobiles. He was no amateur horseman. Best in the business, I bet. He knew all the tricks that were written and lots more that weren't just yet. He'd ridden for many a mile up and down the valleys and draws till his legs looked more like the handles of a couple of crosscut saws. Now, I wouldn't say he was bow-legged. I'd never say things he might hate, but if pigs were loose in the garden, well, you wouldn't put him at the gate. Now, the years had left their impression on his face, as kind as could be, and his hands were gnarled and weathered. They looked like a juniper tree. When the harness was mounted all proper, he clucked, "Now get up there, sis," and the slack was removed from the traces, and we started to reminisce of the days when a horse and cutter was the way to the schoolhouse gate. You'd polish the brass on your harness and you'd pick up your Friday night date. When a horse in the rig was the difference between staying at home with a book or striking out round the country and having yourself a good look at the things that the neighbors were doing, and dances and parties, of course, and all there was to restrain you was work and the speed of your horse. Well, the speed of this horse, I wondered, might be beyond his embrace. But as we started to travel, every hair seemed to be in its place. As we left the yard behind us, why, she broke to a gentle trot. My worries began to escape me, because calmly he sat there and thought. Out into the field we proceeded. The mare saw plenty of space. Her trot became rather extended, but he seemed unaware of her pace. Instead, he just tipped her head slightly to one side, so she made a big arc. He didn't grab lines and holler as if he wanted to park. But when she left the trot for the gallop, I really started to fuss. My elderly friend is in peril. That dang mare, I started to cuss. Her pace continued to quicken as we sped in a circular way. I was sure we were facing misfortune, not to mention the fate of the sleigh. It was clear I had to do something to save this kindly old soul who somehow neglected to notice that we were out of control. So I promptly grabbed for them lines and I stood that mare on her ear with the kind of pressure I learned in my amateur horseman career. Well, when the snow all settled, he said, "Well, tell me, why did you do that?" Well, I said, "Don't you see that I had to? A runaway was the worst of my fears." He smiled and said, "Now, young fellow, I haven't had a good runaway in years." Then he pointed to where we were traveling, a half section all covered in snow. And like city folks in a big hurry, she really had nowhere to go. Then he said, "Here's a lesson about horses," as we started to make our way back. "You can always gather a quarter horse if you give her a half-mile track." The runaway. Okay, thank you. So we've talked a bit about respect and getting respect and pushing them around and so forth, but respect is only half of it. And this is the hard part for me, and I think I'm finally starting to get it so that I handle horses better and better. I think I do anyway, and the main way I see is that I can get them to trust me. And how I know that they trust me is a horse wants to get away from what it's afraid of, and it wants to go to what it feels is safe. I call it joining up. There's all kinds of clinicians nowadays that are doing horse clinics, and you pay a whole bunch of money and they teach you about joining up with horses and horse whispering to horses and stuff. And I'm not putting that down at all. I think that some of them are wonderful and so forth. But I know in my case, I want them to face me. That horse that before turned its hip and offered to kick me, I won't let up on that horse until when I stop pushing it, it turns and faces me. And that's the beginning of trust. Ultimately, what I want to do is it'll face me, and then it'll start walking towards me, and it won't come right up to me, but he'll come about from me to you away, ma'am. It'll come about 3 or 4 paces away and then stop. I don't want it to come right up. And if it comes right up to me, I'll tap it on the chest and say, no. You don't come walking right up to me. I am a tough horse here. I'm not a wolf, but I am the toughest horse in this pen. You don't come walking up to me. That's what's going on in my head. And then I turn and I'll walk away, and they will come right up and walk anywhere I go. Or I'll go like this, and I'll go like this, and they'll go like this, and they'll go like this, and that's trust. And you got to have that to, okay, enough of that. Okay. When I ride in the mountains, and I haven't talked very much about my trips in the mountains, but the thing I do, somebody asked me earlier now, do I like English or do I like Western? Well, I just like horses. And I rode a lot I've ridden English a lot. And I think if I had to choose to ride from here to Ottawa, I'd ride English because it's very comfortable. But if I have to work, I'd go Western because I've got all the equipment I need for Western. But in my mind, and I think in the horse's mind, it's all the same. It's just how you ride. You ride a different way and you use different tack and so forth. There's no doubt about that. But I ride Western in the mountains because I have all this equipment that I'm carrying and saddlebags and saws and axes and stuff that I need to carry. So therefore, it just makes practical sense for me to ride in Western tack. But I haven't talked about riding and packing. I won't go into that at all, but I will tell you a little bit about bears. I've never, touch wood, had a bad experience with bears and horses. I've seen a bear attack from very close range, about 12 feet away. I've been harassed a bit by bears myself a few times on foot. I've been chased out of a camp or two, so it's not that I don't know about bears, but in the 50 some odd years that I've been riding horses in the mountains, I've never had a problem with bears and horses. So I'm starting to come to the point where I think I'm right, that horses and bears seem to have an unspoken respect for each other. Horses don't like bears within about 25 yards. And they seem to understand that within 25 yards, the bear can run them down. And they can. You think this is a lumbering old thing, but I've seen them in full speed, and those hind legs will come up and hit the ground, maybe 6 or 8 feet in front of their nose, and then just explode. And the next time they hit the ground, they're 20 feet down the trail. It's unbelievable how fast they can go when they're serious about it. And a horse seems to understand that that's about as close as I want to be. And they'll get a little bit jumpy and fancy and everything when you get within from here to the other side of that room. But beyond that, I've had horses bend down and start grazing, and there's bear on the trail right there. I've also had bears step off the trail and walk over to that door there, and I'll ride right by them. And the horse and the bear just seem to have this unspoken respect. I've never had an occasion like you see in the Western paintings where the horse is rearing up and the cowboy's falling off the cliff and the bear's going like that. Maybe I'm just lucky, but I've never seen that. So I got to be quite arrogant about that. And I feel like I need to apologize to every woman that ever asked me, will there be bears? For many years. It took me, it was getting older. This didn't happen that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, that I realized what it's like to be so afraid of bears. It's the fear of the unknown is what it is. And it's one thing to know a little bit about them. I've been reading Kevin Van Tiggen's book. There's so many things that I was reading that I just couldn't agree with more. It's exactly, but you don't ever know for sure. But anyway, so I have a story about this. Do you think that there are bears out here? Do you think they might attack? Their apprehension steeped in fear deserved I cut them slack, but instead I nodded with a smile and hid my smugness Western style. 100 guests behind me wrote, pardon me. Another season nearly done, 100 guests behind me rode. On alpine trails beneath the sun, no better job for me bestowed. But all them silly questions asked wore my patience thin at last. Well, to take a rest, or to clear my head and take a rest, I'd sojourn on a ocean beach, where I was now the pampered guest, beyond where trail ride questions reach. The sand, so hot from tropic heat, my boots stayed right there on my feet. My legs appeared a pasty white, protruding from Bermuda shorts, for rarely do they see the light, unlike the folks at these resorts. Then gazing across the waves out there filled my soul with chilling scare. Not accustomed to the sea, I'd mastered swimming at the pool, so what was coming over me, this fear that filled each molecule? Maybe a marine marauder. Boom, boom, boom. Maybe Jaws is in this water. Didn't seem to matter much that I was standing on the shore. Reality was out of touch, and panic oozed from every pore. Then dorsal fins came into view. Shark! I screamed till I was blue. Now, lots of people in their chairs began to leave this resort place. I heard their comments, felt their stares, abandoning me in disgrace. And then a waiter loudly said, "They're only dolphins, you bonehead." Well, now I listen as I guide to folks who think they're in harm's way. I empathize their fear inside and try to keep their stress at bay. Because those phantom sharks, to me, has shown how real is fear of the unknown. And I am deathly scared of the ocean. It's got nothing to do with swimming. And I think I understand what it's like for a person that doesn't know about these guys, that's riding down a chair. If one of these guys shows up, what am I going to do? So that's my little story about bears. Okay. So finding our place in nature. Horses are prey animals and dogs are predators. I think I've covered all of that. Bears are not predators. And we call them that way. But and I read in Kevin's stuff, and I'm happy that they're scavengers, really. They're like us. They're really like us. That's what we are, really, as scavengers, although most of us don't get into the garbage too bad. But we're just opportunists. We go for whatever is handy. There is one thing that is really dangerous with bears. Well, there's many, but there is one thing that it's something to always keep in mind, and that is the smell of rotting flesh, or the smell of death. You know what that smells. If you smell that, you're in trouble if there's bears there, because a bear has a hard time eating fresh flesh. Their teeth are not designed to. They want it. It's disgusting, but they want it rotten. And they bury when they come across a deer that a cougar killed, well, the cougar's on the way, or a wolf kills, they're on their way down the trail because the bear, now this is their kill. And what the first thing they'll do is, well, they'll eat what's soft, but then they'll cover the rest of it, and then they camp right there. And that's dinner for the next 2 weeks. And you happen along, their first thought is, I got to protect my food ticket here. And so it's a dangerous thing to get. It's almost the same, or every bit as equal as the sow with cubs. So, okay, that's what I wanted to say about there. I thought it would be just kind of different to throw in a couple of things about horse gear and cowboy clothing and stuff like that, like tough rags or neckerchiefs, I call them. But there's a lot of things that have evolved in cowboy gear that you might think is for style points, or cowboys like to, be the best dressed and so forth, and that's really not what it is. And I'm going to just picked out one example. Most things, almost without exception, most things that is part of a cowboy's decorum is got a useful purpose. It's there for practical. So the thing I picked out is fringes. If you've ever noticed, on the trailing edge of a jacket, or along across the back, or on gauntlets, they'll be there. On chaps or on the trailing edge, lots of times you see fringes. Why would that be? And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not for style. Good try. That's excellent, but it's wrong. Duh. What? Why? That's right. And the best thing I can think of is, can you imagine you're at the sink and you've washed your hands and the towel is hanging right there? What do you do after you take your hands out of the water and before you grab the towel? That's what fringes do. And if you watch, if you're riding, especially on chaps, and those fringes are doing this, they seem to draw the moisture and wick it away. So I hope that that's not the most important thing you learned this evening, but just the same. Oh gosh, I forget. Is it this one? I'm having a trouble remembering which. Nope. Which one is my? There, I got it. So the last thing that I think I want to finish off with is called riding at liberty. And riding at liberty is riding with no control whatsoever over the horse, except for the communication that exists. And so this takes me back to Northumberland Learning Center. You have no control over the world, and you just have to trust the things that you hear. And so the information you get from the horse's mouth, so to speak, is it's a lot easier to trust that you're getting good information instead of looking it up on whatever you look it up, Facebook or whatever. And with horses, if you really think that you're half handy with a horse and you really want to test yourself to see how well you're communicating with that horse, will you try riding at liberty? So you have no bridle, you have no halter, you have no saddle, you have no nothing but you and the horse. And you would think this is crazy. How in the world would you want to ride a horse with no communication at all? I don't recommend it. Don't go home and try this yourself. But horse trainers will build a rapport between a horse to the point where you can ride them at liberty. And so what that means is you do it with your brain. There isn't really much more to it than that. But I think, let's go, and we go. I think we're going left, and we go left. I think we're going to stop. Let's back up. We're going to stop again. We're going to turn on the haunches and go over here. I think that. And it's incredible. It's an incredible experience that makes me a real disciple of all this stuff that I've been trying to tell you about, how you can communicate with this animal to that extent. But it was going on a long time ago. In North America, it was going on at least 200 years ago. And I'll tell you why. Is this the picture? So 200 years ago, when buffalo were roaming across the prairie, they traveled in herds. These big, mean guys traveled on the outsides. They didn't have little calves and ones with arthritis out on the outside. The bulls stayed on the outside, and when they escaped as a group and with the bulls on the outside. These are not like cattle, I can tell you that firsthand. They can move. They can outrun a cow like nothing, and they're mean. And if they can get you, they will get you, and they aren't kidding, okay? So it's 200 years ago, and your job is go get a buffalo for supper, and you get out there on your horse, and you're riding at liberty because you have no saddle. Okay, the chief said, you can have a bridle today. But you better learn to ride this horse without a bridle because you aren't going to get a buffalo with a bridle. Because as you're going full blast up beside this big buffalo here, you got to take an arrow out of your quiver, notch it, and draw it back, and shoot an arrow into its. Who's going to control the horse if you're doing all of that? And that's so horses. The native people, they call them their buffalo horse. When they said, this is my buffalo horse, that's a very good horse, and it's because of the level of communication. It didn't mean that this was the prettiest horse or it had the nicest coloring or it was the fastest even. It meant he and I are on the same page at full speed beside a dangerous animal. So it really impresses me. So it's all about trust and respect, and good for Northumberland for promoting communication, because that's what breeds trust and respect. And there's one more little thing here. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the whole world was based on that? Here's my grandkids. They all have to learn how to when I start people riding, even adults, when I start them, they have to ride bare. I'll put on a blanket with a sear single, and they have to learn to ride bareback just like I did when I was a kid. I don't know if any of you came from farming backgrounds or your parents came. There was no saddle. You rode bareback, but boy, did you learn balance. You just kept falling off till you learned to balance, and that's how it goes. And so this is the last little message I got for the boys. I think that's the end. Okay. You want to use this? No, it's not. Here, this is live here. You can use it.
Okay, we don't have time for a lot of questions, but I'm going to take 3 questions, and then I'm going to let you speak to VJ after, just in case people need to get home. So do I have any questions?
My mother never called me VJ. My name is Brian, but my last name is Smith, so that's like going through life unlisted. When I got into the mounted police, Smith wasn't cutting it for them, so they used my initials, and it stuck with me, and I'm not even sure I like it, but that's the story.
Well, I wondered about introducing you as Brian, because I read that, and I thought, no, he's
Call me late for supper.
you bet. Okay, Linda?
This is a question about bears. I grew up in Alberta, and grizzlies. Have you had any experience with grizzlies? Because their reaction and the way they might track you and whatnot are different. That's fun to them. They will follow you, and maybe I've heard they even drag you out of your sleeping bag occasionally.
I know that's what you hear. I don't agree with that at all, and my experience hasn't been that case at all. First of all, there's 2 things that you said that are important. One thing that caught me right away: black bears are dangerous, and they can kill you just as dead as a grizzly bear. So you don't, because it's a black bear, ease up. But the second thing is they're an opportunist, and if they smell a cooler in your tent, they'll go through your tent and take you with them if you happen to be a tasty morsel yourself. I mean, their whole life is centered around getting enough food, enough nutrition, and grizzly bears are 80-85% vegetarian. They eat mostly vegetarian or vegetables, but they certainly will eat whatever meat happens to come. I've had lots and lots of encounters with bears, lots and lots, and I have a great deal of respect. I'm not sure they know what they're going to do next, but it's always been successful for me that I give them their space. If I happen to get real close to them, I want to try to back away without running away or cowering away. I want to back away and let them have their space, but really let them decide what's going on next. And I haven't had a bad experience with that. The last thing I want to say about that is that I almost never spook a bear when I'm horseback, because if I'm horseback, the bear will know I'm there if the wind is coming to its face. The horse will know the bear's there if the wind is coming from the bear's back. So the thing that I tell people is, if to be safe in traveling on foot or however you're traveling, is be aware of the air. The keenest nose in the bush is the bear's, better than a wolf. And they travel around. When a bear stands up like this in a meadow, he's not trying to see you, he's trying to smell you. And so be aware of the air. It's the safest thing you can do. And if you're walking down the trail and there's a breeze at your back, you're pretty safe. if there's a breeze at your face, pay attention. That's a good time for this whistling and the bells going on. There.
I have been in a tent with the bear
Yeah.
between me and the canvas, walking around at night, trying to smell to see whether there's anything in the tent.
Yeah.
Not a pleasant experience.
It's very intimidating, and I'm not trying to downplay it. They're a dangerous animal, and they you know. I have to say one more thing, because the government of Canada in the national parks, because of litigation, because of due diligence, they encourage you, and in fact they even install poles so you can hang your pack up in the air 20 feet up so the bear can't get it. That you might as well bring along a neon sign that says "Eat here," because a bear travels around by his nose. I understand completely. I'm not saying it's a stupid thing for the government to do. I understand it completely. But it's a dangerous thing, and I never do that. I always put my perishable, whatever smells, goes on the ground under a big spruce by a creek if I can find it. I want a damp area that's low down to the ground where the wind won't catch the scent and send it down the valley. But I can't say do that, because if I was the government and you did that and that bear did eat you, well, here we go. I'm paying another bunch of money out. Okay, who is? Yes.
Yes, hello. This is a rather silly, pardon? Oh, a rather silly question. I'm still
I
curious.
got silly answers galore.
I'm still curious about what cowboys wear. What's the story behind the big brassy belt buckles?
Dinner plates. You got me on that one. That is, and it seems that they can get to be to ridiculous sizes if they're trophy buckles and stuff like that. But I would have to concede that would be one item that has very little or no utility other than look at me, how good I did. Good one.
When I was out west, the cowboy told me it was to rub against a girl's tummy when they were dancing.
See, and I never got that close. If I had only known that all this time.
Do we have another question?
Yes.
I have a question about training the horses to go into the trailer.
Yes.
And so you said that you had another technique if they were babies.
Yes.
But you weren't going to tell us.
Yes.
But will you
I will tell
us?
you. I will tell you.
Okay, thank you.
I have mares foal at my place, and in that first week, they learn a whole bunch of stuff from their mother. I let the mother teach them a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things is I get the mother to teach them to go in the trailer. So what I do is I back the trailer. I'll have a little paddock, and I'll back my trailer up to a gate that you can't get out unless you go in the trailer. And I'll put something in the trailer for the mare to eat. If she's a particularly stubborn one, that's the only place she'll get water. By the way, a horse can go 30 days without food, 3 days without water. People think, oh, they got to hurry up and get that hay there, but it's the water that. But anyway, I will put that trailer in that position so you can see where I'm going with this. When Mom gets in, the little guy runs around. Oh my God, what's going to happen now? And he's only 3 days old. And oh my God. But inside of a day, boop, he's going in there. And in 3 days, he goes in first and says, "Mom, are you coming in?" I see that all the time. And it really works good. If you can get a horse to do what you want them to do, and it's their idea, it's way more effective then. Thank you. Okay.
Sort of sounds like dealing with teenagers. Thank you, BJ, and I'm sure there'll be more questions, but we have to wrap this up. Your speaking style reflects your other retirement profession as a Western entertainer, and I'm sure you caught that all with this poetry. Cowboys developed this style of speaking when they were around the campfire, and BJ's performance has been featured in cowboy poetry gatherings and festivals across Western Canada, which you have no doubt about. Tomorrow, he is giving a performance at the Capitol Theatre at Port Hope at 8 o'clock. And we drove in here with Borden, who tells me that the Northumberland Players event tomorrow night has been canceled because the performers have COVID. So guess what we can have all those people do? We'll invite them all to come to the Capitol Theatre in Port Hope, 7:30 for an 8 o'clock program. It'll be about 90 minutes with an intermission. Furby Books will be there selling poetry. And if you don't have time to buy it online, exact change at the door will get you in. So thank you also to our Zoom audience for being with us this evening and bearing with the questions. I did try to limit it to 3. Your loyalty and support keeps us motivated to bring you great programs. And please feel free to give feedback to any of the NLC directors that are scattered around the room or through the info at NLC on our webpage. So thank you all. Oops.
Just to mention that they need proof of vaccination.
Oh, exactly. The Capitol Theatre requires proof of vaccination and masking. So we are using their facility, so make sure you bring along your proof if you're coming. And we'll see you tomorrow night, I hope. Thank you and good night. And don't forget, books by Furby, and BJ will sign them.
I just want to quickly add in here, if you don't mind, but I didn't say tomorrow night is just for fun. And it should make you laugh. I'm not going to be telling any. This was a lot of real serious stuff that I don't normally perform in my shows because people mostly want to laugh. But tomorrow is just going to be a whole bunch of fun. So, okay, thank you.